As the life of a flower, as a breath or a sigh, so the years that we live as a dream hasten by. Through today we are here, but tomorrow may see just a grave in the veil and a memory of me. As the life of a flower, as a breath or a sigh, so the years glide away, and alas, we must die. As the life of a flower, be our lives pure and sweet. May we rise in the way for the friends that we greet, and sweet incense arise from our hearts as we live close to Him who doth teach us to love and forgive. As the life of a flower, as a breath or a sigh, so the years glide away, and alas, we must die. While we tarry below, let us trust and adore Him who leads us each day toward the radiant shore, where the sun never sets and the flowers never fade, where no sorrow or death makes borders invade. As the life of a flower, as a breath or a sigh, so the years glide away, and alas, we must die.
Got a few that are out tonight. We have Laura's not feeling good, and Candy's got bronchitis and not feeling good. And Inez is still at home. She's got sinus and such like, and a headache, but she may be a little bit better, but still not feeling well enough to be out tonight. It's good to have Dwayne and Ian back with us this evening, and so we just need to be aware of what's going on and people's lives, and just keep check on each other. It's very important that we do so. I really enjoyed this year's lecture at Freed-Hardeman University. I do every year. Last year they finished the book of Revelation, and so they started over in the book of Genesis again and had a lot of varied topics. They had a few topics they given people to speak on, and like Spencer Furby, and he spoke, I believe, on Tuesday, and he got up and he said he didn't know why the lectureship committee gave him the topic that he was given to speak on, and thanked them very much. But he did a great job. And then we had another speaker that got up and said the same thing, because they spoke on different aspects of life. They spoke about slavery in one session. They talked about sexual impurity and things of this nature in other sections, and all of it was based on the book of Genesis. And a couple of the speakers got up and they made the statement that they never realized that there were so many dysfunctional families in the book of Genesis. Well, you go back and you read about some of those dysfunctional families. Adam and Eve had a dysfunctional family in that they disobeyed God. And then they had a son that turned out to be a murderer. And then you go on down the line and you find that nearly every family had dysfunction in it. Abraham had dysfunction in his family. You go on down to Jacob, had dysfunction in his family. And that's where we want to kind of look at tonight to begin talking about our lesson, Teach Me How to Die Well. Tonight we are going to talk about dying. And this lesson was presented by Brother Dan Winkler, who always does a great job He speaks usually around 8:30 or 9:30 during the lectureship thing, and they have just redone the auditorium. It used to be called Lloyd Auditorium because a family named Lloyd gave the money to build it, but now it's called Dryden Auditorium because a family named Dryden, along with others, gave money to refurbish it. The chairs that had been there since it opened have now been replaced, and I really like that because they're a lot better, but they still get kind of old. But they moved Dan Winkler into the main area of the auditorium, the main part of the auditorium a few years ago because of the vast number of people that would come to hear him preach. And he spoke on the life of Joseph. I have other lessons that I may present somewhere, but he presented this Thursday morning before I left, and it stuck in my mind. You might say, well, it's not a good time to teach about dying because we have had death in this congregation, 2 in the last few weeks. When I came to Southside in 2015, I knew the age of the congregation. And I didn't know whether we'd run into something like this or not. But for most of the years that I've been here, the Lord only took one from us just about during all those years. And it's picked up a little bit the last few years. But we need to realize, as we'll see tonight, that death is a part of life. And since we know that, we need to learn to know how to die well. And I thought that this lesson is one that is needed for us at any time, but maybe in light of the death of Brother Bill and the death of Brother Ed and the death of Brother Chris and others, Paula and others, in the last few months. Because we need to learn to die well. Our text is taken from the book of Genesis, and we want to begin and look at the last few verses of the book of Genesis. If you want to turn there, you can. We're not going to read all of them, but it really sets the stage for our lesson. We look at the life of Joseph. Joseph had lived 110 years of age. 110 years of age. I turned the microphone on now, but he lived 110 years of age. And he ended a life full of struggles and disappointments. If you just think about the life of Joseph, you think, he had it pretty good until you start thinking about the life he lived. We realize that he was the favorite of his father, yet misunderstood because of his dreams. And you read about this in Genesis 37, verse 3 and verse 10. Verse 3 says that Jacob was the favorite, or Joseph was the favorite of his father. And he made him that coat of many colors, or as one translator or one speaker, Dan Winkler, said today, this week, it depends on whether or not what translation you mean. It can mean a coat of many colors or a coat with long sleeves. Well, I like many colors because Dolly Parton wrote a song about that. But we have this idea that Joseph was the favorite. And yet, when he dreamed the dream about his brethren, including his father and mother, bowing down before him, Israel misunderstood and rebuked Joseph for having that dream or the interpretation of that dream. And then you had his brothers. His brothers hated him. The text says, though, in verse 4 of chapter 37, they hated him. And then they sold him into slavery. Remember, they first wanted to kill him. They first wanted to kill him and decided to kill him. And it was Judah, I think, that came up with that idea. Let's kill him. Let's get rid of him. And then when Reuben came back and got on to him and said, we can't kill him, and he went away for a little while, they decided to do second best thing. They were the Midianites that came along. Remember what they did? They took him out of the pit and they sold him and they took him to Egypt. Well, he got down in Egypt, and things worked out pretty good for him a while. He was in the head of Potiphar's house. He was kind of like second in command. And Potiphar didn't worry about anything, but Potiphar had a lustful wife. And you remember that she accused finally Joseph of rape and set him up and told Potiphar and said, you know, here are all these men in my house. Because she went and told the men what had happened to her. And put Potiphar on the spot. Here are all these men that know what happened to me, and are you going to do anything about it? And we know that he was cast into the king's prison. And when he was in prison, he was blessed, because you read where the jailer placed the things in him and everything went good, had confidence in him. And in prison, he had the chief butler and the chief baker have dreams, and he interpreted them. The chief butler got out. The chief baker died because Joseph said he was. He was executed. And the chief butler said, I want you to know that I will remember you when I get out. Well, he did. Anybody remember how long it was? Anybody? 2 years. 2 years. And it wasn't until Pharaoh dreamed the dream that he dreamed that the butler said, oh, guess what? There's a person in your jail that's been down in the pit for 2 years. Brother Winkler said that Joseph was thrown in the pit once and gotten out and then thrown in the pit again, because you read when they got Joseph cleaned up, shaved him, everything, go see Pharaoh, where did they get him out of? It says they got him out of the pit. And here's the life of Joseph. And we don't know if Joseph understood all the things that were going to happen. We think that he got a glimpse of it. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But Joseph, through all of it, may have not realized God was with him, but as we'll see, God truly was with him. And after mistreatment of his brothers, in chapter 39, I skipped a page. Truly, his death was precious in the eyes of the Lord, as we read in Psalms 116 and verse 15. Because Joseph died well. And that's what I want us to talk about tonight. Because we need to die well when we pass from this life. And Joseph did. There are 4 things I want to share with you very quickly, try to get through with these as quickly as possible. But Dan Winkler puts a lot of stuff in his outlines, and I didn't include all of it, but I want to include as much as possible. First of all, we need to realize to die well, we must make certain our heart is right. We must make certain our heart is right. We sing the old song sometimes, is thy heart right with God? That's a very important song to sing. It asks a very important question. Not only when we think we might be approaching our death, but also when we're living life like it's never going to end. We'll talk about that in a moment. We need to realize that we have a heart that is right with God. Again, even though the life of Joseph was full of disappointments and mistreatments, there is not a single instance where he did wrong in response to all of these. You can read the chapters that are there, and there is not a single instance where we can put our finger on, Joseph, you messed up. Not a one. His heart was right with God. And now to the slide that I thought I was on a while ago. After the mistreatment of his brothers in chapter 39, when they all got down to Egypt because of the famine, and were down in Egypt, we find that he later forgave them, even when he had the power to punish them Look at verses 19 through 21. Let's set the stage. Jacob is dead. Jacob died. And so we find to where they were worried about that. And yet, he did not hold it against them. He said, "Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God?" When people mistreat us, like they mistreated him, and we wanted exact vengeance, we need to remember what Joseph may have never heard before, but it's in the New Testament where the Lord said what? "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." Joseph simply said, "Am I the Lord? Am I in the place of God?" And he said, "But as for you, you meant evil against me." And here it is. This is why I think that he had to have an inkling. He said, "But God meant it for good, in order to bring about this day to save many people alive. Now therefore do not be afraid. I will provide," now listen to what he says, "for you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph's heart was right, and he died well. We must, in order to die well, make sure our heart is right. Jesus is another example of one dying well. Brother Winkler, in each presentation that he gave, would talk about Joseph, and then he would flip over and talk about Jesus. We're going to do so in this lesson. Jesus is another example of one dying well. And we know that Jesus was misunderstood. He was mistreated, and finally he was murdered, and yet he did not sin. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 21 said he became a sin offering for us who had no sin. We know that he did not retaliate. When he was spit upon, he did not retaliate. And then we know again that when he was reviled, he reviled not. And we know that he forgave others. Even those that were casting lots on his clothes, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Jesus died well because we need to realize the importance that his heart was right with God. In the second place, to die well, we must accept our own mortality. We're going to die. I'm going to walk over here and sit in this chair, and hopefully I get up. But years ago, I heard a preacher when I was a teenager that came to Osceola, Arkansas, named Willard Collins. I talked about Willard, probably this illustration. And Willard talked about God's schedule for man out of Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter. And I remember during that sermon, Brother Collins walking over to the chair like they had on their stage, like we have on ours, and he sat down and he said, "You know, I go in sometimes and I sat down and I say, Willard, you're going to have to die." I sat here tonight and say, Bill, one day you're going to die. Now, if I know Jesus coming back, I'll be changed, hopefully, in a moment, in a twinkling of the eye at the last trump, but I won't die. But most of us, unless the Lord comes in our lifetime, all of us are going to die. And yet, you look at how we live life, even older people. Most of the time, we live life as if we're never going to die. Now, just think about it. Isn't that true? We make our plans. We plan for the future. We plan for way out. We plan. We live life as if we're not going to die until. Brother Winkler referred to the C word. You know what the C word is? It's cancer. He went through a bout of cancer that they didn't know if he would make it or not. His wife has been through a recent bout of cancer. And was very sick and in the hospital for a number of weeks. We've been through that in my family. Smithies have been through that, and a lot of you have been through the very same thing. And there's something about that word that shocks you into realizing you may not live forever. It changes your life. And you have to live according to a new normal. It takes something like that or some other illness or some other thing to make us come to face with our own mortality. One day we're going to have to die. We live in life where we want more life. We want more joy. We want more pleasure. We want more adventure and the other things that life has to offer, which there's nothing wrong with this. And yet we need to realize among all of these things that all these things, as we'll see, are uncertain. We love our loved ones and others around us, and for the most part don't ever think about leaving them. He takes these life insurance commercials on TV. Have you watched them? They usually set up, one particular company sets up with something like this. Husband and wife talking. You know Joe down the street died? And now his wife is having to take care of all the things that he had. Have you taken out, have you called that life insurance company yet? Or sometimes it'll go something like this. You know, Joe down the street died, but they had taken out that life insurance company or that life insurance policy. And she's getting through it all right, if that's worth a less thing. But that's what the insurance company wants you to know. And what are they doing? They're wanting you to go out and buy life insurance, but they're also wanting you to come face to face with your own mortality. And we need to do that. Whatever age we're in, we need to realize that we're mortal beings. However, we must accept our own mortality like Joseph did in 50 verse 24 if we're going to die well. Joseph, like Jacob did, said, I'm going to die. Going to happen. Said it twice. I'm going to die. I want us to consider these verses real quickly. Job 14 and verse 1, man that is born of woman is but a few days and full of trouble. Hebrews 9 and verse 27, as it is appointed a man wants to die, and after this, the judgment. James 4 verses 13 through 16, Jesus said, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we're going to such a city and spend a year there and buy and sell and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen on tomorrow. And then he asked that question, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. And again, we consider Jesus. We consider Jesus after the Mount of Transfiguration. He came to his apostles in Matthew the 16th chapter after Peter said, "You are the Son of God." I mean, after, again, he asked the disciples, who do you say men in? He said, "You are the Son of God." Jesus immediately said, "You don't go tell anybody that he was Jesus the Christ. You don't go tell anybody." Because in verse 21, listen to what Jesus said. From that time, Jesus began to show. I think that's interesting. He didn't just tell them, he showed them that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed and be raised the third day. Go to Matthew 17, verse 22. Now while they're staying in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and on the third day he'll be raised up." And they were exceedingly sorrowful. Jesus accepted his own morality. Jesus prepared others to accept his mortality. And he let them know, "I'm going to die." Now to the Mount of Transfiguration. In Luke the 19th chapter, before Moses and Elijah disappeared, Luke is the only one to tell us what the discussion was all about. In verse 31 of Luke 19, I put the wrong verse in. Okay, well, it's in Luke 9:31. I've corrected it. It says, "Who appeared in glory and spoke of his decease." Now, who was there in Luke 9? Moses and Elijah. They were talking. What were they talking about? They spoke of his decease. The Greek word there is Exodus. We know what Exodus means. You look and define the second book of the Bible, and maybe as a young Bible student, the teacher would say, now Exodus means the going out. And it does. That's what Jesus was talking to Moses and Elijah about, his going out, his leaving of this age. Jesus died well because he accepted his own mortality. But then we come into the next one. To die well, one must trust God's promises. One must trust God's promises. We've already spoken about the fact that Joseph said on 2 occasions, "I'm dying." But it's interesting to note what he did say along with that. Look at Genesis 50, verse 24. And Joseph said to his brethren, "I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." When Jacob died, he said the same thing, "I'm dying." And remember that he made the promise to his sons to carry his bones out of Egypt. And they did. And then over in Genesis 50 and verse 25, then Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, "God will surely visit you and carry my bones from here." How did Joseph know? Well, you go back to those three names at the bottom of the screen in the bottom of verse 24 of Genesis 50. God swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. What was the promise? That in thy seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed. I'm going to lead you to a land. Abraham understood it, according to the Hebrew writer, as a place whose builder and maker was God that was eternal in the heaven. And all those folks did. Your people are going to be blessed. Your seed are going to be like the stars of the sky and the sand of the sea, innumerable. He made the promise to Isaac. He made the promise to Jacob. And Joseph believed God's promises. Do we? Do we trust God's promises when He talks about the fact He'll never leave us or forsake us? Well, Jesus believed in the promises of God for His resurrection. Again, in Matthew 16, verse 21, He again told them, as we've already looked at, that He would go to Jerusalem, He would suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and He'd be killed. But here's one thing that again, He will be raised what? The third day. He didn't have to worry. And it scared those scribes and Pharisees to death, because that's when they went out and put that station at the tomb, because Jesus told them He was going to rise the third day. They didn't understand that you could put a legion there and it was still going to happen. You could put a stone there and it's still going to be rolled away. It is going to happen. But let's move on. We must believe in God's promises of the resurrection as well. We're going to summarize part of this, but it's on the screen. Paul says, I'm going to tell you a mystery. We're not all going to die. We're not all going to sleep, but we will be changed. It's going to happen when? In a moment, and a twinkling of the eye at the last trump. And he talked about the mortal must put on immortality, the corruptible must put on incorruption, and we're going to be changed. And he said, you know, that flesh and blood can inherit the kingdom of God. And basically, that's what he's saying. And he said that death is swallowed up in victory. But listen to verse 55. O death, where is your sting? O grave or Hades, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of the sin is the law. But listen to what he said in verse 57 and 58. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that our labor is not in vain in the Lord. And finally, in Revelation 14 and verse 13, then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. I like that. What is from now on? The last person that ever dies on this earth, that's a Christian. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors. Friends, we must, to die well, trust in God's promises for us. And finally, and the lesson is yours, to die well, we must die loving our brethren. In spite of everything that they did to him, Joseph still loved his brothers. You remember that when Jacob died, they worried. They said the only reason that we're staying around here and why Joseph hadn't killed us or put us in prison or killed us for what we did to him is because of Daddy. Daddy's dead. And it's unknown, but it almost appears like they lied to Joseph again because of the fact they come to him and they say, you know, when Daddy was alive, he said, don't do anything to us. And there's no instance in the Bible, at least, where those words are recorded. They could have lied to us. What they did not count on. What they did not count on is after all the mistreatment and after all the things they put him through, Joseph still loved them. The verse we already read, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Talked about being kind in our lesson this morning. Joseph was kind to his brothers. That hated him, that threw him in a pit, and then sold him into slavery. Joseph died well because he loved his brothers. We can't leave this life and die well if we have aught against our brother. And if you have aught against your brother, you ought to go and make it right, even tonight, if you have the opportunity. But I want you to look at one more to think of Jesus. Paul, in describing the Christian relationship, said, husbands, love your wife, or the family relationship, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Jesus died well because he loved not only his brothers and his followers, but those who drove the very nails into his hands and his feet and pierced his side and lifted him and dropped him in a hole with a thud. To die well, we must love one another. And Peter closes, since you have purified your souls and obeying the truth through the spirit and sincere love of the brethren, love one another with a pure heart. We need to realize that, yes, we need to prepare for death. But do you realize that not only do we need to prepare for death, that that's not our major task in life? Our major task in life is to prepare others for death. We live in a world that's lost and dying in sin that needs to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. They need to hear how to die well, because all are going to die. It's as certain as it can be. And the points of this lesson about mortality applies to the person going down the highway right now that doesn't know Jesus. And God has given us the responsibility to prepare them as well to die well. Death is but a transition in time. It's not the end for the sinner whose soul will face an eternity in hell. And it's not the end of the saints that are now in Abraham's bosom, those that have gone before waiting for the resurrection. And for those that are waiting for Jesus to come again, that will be changed in a moment and twinkling of the eye. And after the judgment, God saved people by His grace will be with Him for an eternity in heaven. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. Do you know how to die well tonight? Are you ready? Are you prepared? What will your answer be? If you need to come, won't you come? We stand and sing.
Have you entered Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in His grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you walking daily by the Savior's side? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Do you rest each moment in the crucified? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? When the bridegroom cometh, will your robes be white, pure and white in the blood of the Lamb? Will your soul be ready for the mansion's bride, and be washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Lay aside the garments that are stained with sin, and be washed in the blood of the Lamb. There's a fountain flowing for the soul unclean, will be washed in the blood of the Lamb. Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood